Okay, well, I'm not going to go back through that. So I want you to be aware that these models exist, and it may help you. Uh, it's helpful to know that they're out there, and it's also helpful to know that a lot of this um, activities have been cataloged, uh, enablers have been cataloged. Here we have in this study, this is a different study, and let me go back to my PowerPoint slides with my notes on it. This is the Bouchara study, and here these researchers did a lit review. They looked at all the studies that were out there. They came up with 14 eligible studies that met the requirements of what they were looking for, and they found 100 unique benefits that they categorized into three value generating mechanisms. Okay, so there are 100 of these, and they categorize them into financial perspective, internal perspective, yes, that's a mouthful, and learning and growth perspective. And so once again, what are these things? These are unique benefits, and they categorize them. So this may help you sometime in your organization, in your EA, just knowing that this stuff, there is research out there. And here's the overall model. So you can pull these studies together. You have enterprise architecture, the quality of an EA. Depending on the quality, you can get these benefits or enable these benefits, which in turn produce organizational performance benefits. So these are multiple studies that I looked at, and don't worry about that. Here are citations, and there are many, many more models out there. The problem with these models, from my point of view, is that a lot of these are subjective, and so they're surveys, and surveys are fine depending on how many people you survey and what the robustness of your survey is. But when you base a lot of research on survey responses from 50 people, I'm not sure how much you can conclude. But a lot of research has been done that is helpful in moving things forward, at least from my perspective. So I just want you to be aware of that. Questions, comments?
I like when I looked through your list just briefly there, most of the book and the paper we read said almost nobody does it or it's a difficult thing to do. I like the fact that some of those things are like yes or no. Did you do this or not do this? Because then that could be, I'll say, measured or maybe a survey or something like that. The actual, did you improve it by 20% or money, like you said, can be a little more subjective.
Right, right. So are you saying, Mark, that with, or Michael, was that Michael? Mike, who was talking?
Yes.
Mike. That with some of these models, you can get to more specifics? Is that what you were getting at? To measure some of these things? I'm not getting an answer. Okay, well.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
You couldn't hear me.
Oh, right.
Some of them you could get an absolute answer. Did you do this or not do this? Did you improve the process? Yes or no, and that can be a very thing. But you might not have actually improved time frame. Might have improved happiness, morale, ease of
Right.
moving the process along. And so too many times maybe they're looking into did you cut the time on something? And I think someone mentioned in the discussion board that I cut the time, or I may have not cut the time because the next thing I measured was a much more difficult magnitude of a problem. So if it had been the same problem again, which odds are you're not doing, it would have been less time, kind of thing.
All right. Speaking of the discussion, so here are some of the, I like some of these. There were two major themes that I pulled together some things. It's difficult to measure EA value. And then you provided, many of you provided examples of metrics or measurement processes, which was really nice. And you included some further readings, which was also very nice. I didn't get to all of those additional readings. Some of them I'm already familiar with, but I have a list of further things to look into. So thank you all for that. So here, under difficult to measure EA value, no metrics. Most federal agencies, Clay couldn't be with us tonight because he has a predicament at work, but he says most federal agencies have not established metrics to capture the outcomes of their EA programs. Jyoti said, the one constant I'm coming across is that there are not many organizations that have established metrics as a means of measuring EA value. Dan says, I suspect that what really is at stake is whether an EA program with its efforts to align strategy, business, and technology can be evaluated from a financial impact perspective. I have companies in the center that say, here's what I want. I want to be able to point to a number and say, this is the value of EA. Doesn't everyone want to be able to do that? But that's, in my opinion, how can you do that? Right? Here's another one. Alfredo says, my current organization confuses EA with IT architecture, which we've seen before and talked about before, and therefore does not share the metrics of IT with business and people to get a holistic picture. So there we have organizational boundaries, an us versus them attitude.
Yeah, but don't you need to measure EA, in terms that are, or metrics that are outside of EA, right? I mean, it makes no sense. It's like, hey, we're doing EA, when we're measuring it, we're doing EA awesome, but what good is that, if you're just looking at EA on an island, right? I mean, people do EA not just to do it to check a box, or maybe they do, but ultimately you want to do it to show value elsewhere.
Right. That's right. No argument there.
If I went and partnered that with like SOA when it was out, its main benefit wasn't that it helped the systems talk together per se. It was that the defects and the maintenance went down because of the way you decoupled the system. So in some cases, that's your benefit of EA, is that your maintenance costs go down and things move smoother between systems.
Understood. Agreed. The problem is, how do you measure those things? How do you measure the benefits of EA? Many benefits that were in those other slides I looked at or showed you, you can't easily measure those. You can ask people about their opinions. Is life better with EA? Can you do things faster? And depending on how you phrase questions, so there's objective measures and there's subjective measures. Everybody would like an objective measure, but it's clearly not so easy.
But isn't that's kind of what I was alluding to, right? Like you can't look at the specific parts of EA, right? You look at your normal regular business metrics, either prior to EA or in the present framework, and then you look at them, after you implement the next framework, and you see, hey, did anything change? Was it good? Was it bad?
Anybody else have a comment?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm kind of curious about EA being used in industry.
I'm sure somewhere in some company, EA is being used well, and they've developed some sort of value and metrics and benefit system that works well for seeing how EA works. Is there some response back to the academic side on which benefit model might work well?
So what I
If
found,
it can be tied to a dollar value, that'd be good. That'd be one thing that everybody would appreciate and buy into that.
well, sure, but how can you do that?
Well, that's if before you measure it before and then after some process improvement that's recommended by the EA, they initiate that, then I mean.
But you can't always say that EA was in fact responsible for
Right.
the improvements. It's sure they are enabling, and we can take some credit, but there's no exact cause and effect. We did this in EA, and therefore you saved this money. And if EA wasn't there, would they not have saved that money? So it's helpful, and I use those measurements. You know, the process took this much time prior to the process improvement, and now it takes less and we've saved money, but EA can't make the claim for the entire savings or responsible for the savings.
Yeah, I think that's the difficulty. It cannot be directly tied to it. It's an indirect.
Exactly.
And if it can be agreed, like you said, who knows?
That's what those models I showed you were getting at. There is no, most times there is no direct benefit. EA enables something else, which then enables or enhances performance. So there's not a direct line of sight between EA and organizational performance.
The only way you could measure a direct line would be to plan in advance what you were going to do, take a measure before, change nothing else.
Right.
And do your EA part and then measure after. That's the only way to do a
Right.
hardcore.
So we call that, in science, we call that a controlled study. And in the organizational world, you don't have controlled studies. Not at the enterprise level.
As well, because I mean, in the U.S., the U.S. struggles to do proper project management, and project management is like, you know, a stepping stone to like even enterprise architecture. So I think, you know, my experience with several different government contractors and commercial sector, you know, they're just not there yet. They don't have that. One, they don't have the knowledge. Two, they don't have the bandwidth. They're struggling to just get their business, you know, their mission critical business objectives done. And they don't have the additional funding to kind of take a step back and look at the big picture and try and adjust things.
Got it. Anyone else want to comment?
I think one of the reasons it's so hard to measure is because it's, I don't know how accurate of a statement this will be, it's really more of a business or organizational philosophy for people who don't have one. And in that sense, just having some structure and definition, while maybe it's not directly quantitative, you can take an undocumented environment where people just sort of make it up as they go and demonstrate that people are moving as a team. You know, that'll change a little bit from organization to organization, but that would be one way you can measure it. And most places that I would think would implement EA would be places that don't already have something, and certainly not something that's working.
Thank you for that. Anyone else want to comment or respond?
Well, even the little story, I guess, or the case study or whatever it is in the text, right, with the fake company. I mean, you know, there's a bunch of executives sitting around the table, but of course they're immediately asking, you know, what is the ROI on this, right? In terms of dollars. I mean, they're jumping right in, not like, well, you know, we're just kind of adrift without a rudder here, and we're gonna do this just for the sake of doing it. No, I mean, there has to be a tangible, measurable return in order to do it. Else, why would they do it? I mean, you can't manage that way.
But it's like it's almost not proven yet in the industry, and therefore there's not enough case studies and success stories out there that show that value.
There are more and more case studies out there in the academic literature, which you all have access to through our wonderful library. And I'm pulling some up as I'm continue to work on, I'm looking at EA, the value of EA as enabling organizational agility is sort of what I'm looking at now. Steve and I are looking at now. And I'm finding case studies, but again, it's similar to, I guess, with the, well, no, I'm not going to say quality. I mean, you can measure defects, but with EA, it's much of it is less tangible, and therefore it's subjective, and you're not going to be able to measure direct of EA in many organizations. So here's to get to this value versus metrics. Metrics by definition must be measurable. In contrast, value is not always a tangible thing that we can assign a number to. And Teresa shared that. And I agree wholeheartedly. Justin says, it's
Hey,
easy.
Rosemary, sorry
Yes.
to interrupt. I just want to let you know that Susan Kopeck is here.
Yes, I know. I saw.
Sure.
I saw. Thank you. And Justin says it's easy to see the value of them, EA metrics, but it's much harder to gauge which ones provide the most benefit and how the necessary data should be gathered. That's right. So even when you come up with EA metrics, to actually implement those and collect the, it's difficult. There are so many moving parts. Go ahead, Doug. No.
Hello. Sorry for joining late. It's well after 2 in our area.
Okay. Sorry. Well, welcome. We're glad to have you.
Thank you.
So I know that Susan here. Go ahead.
What about in those cases where the EA program reduces duplicative resources? Pull together different systems into one system that operates more efficiently. And some people may not like that, but in systems where it's actually able to reduce personnel, is that not?
Sure, that can be measurable. The problem with that, is being able to attribute those reductions in FTE. Is that can you attribute that to the EA effort? You can. Redundancy is much easier to calculate the value of than some of the other things. Yes, Doug, you are being applauded for joining us. We are happy to have you.
Thank you.
So the other part of this was examples of metrics and measurement processes. Pinky talked about going lean in response to Brian, and I'll let you read through these. Because it's 7:59, and I will post all these. I believe someone brought to my attention that maybe the PowerPoints from last week weren't posted. Magda, we've got to get that. Magda, that should be your job because I'm falling behind on that. So Magda and I will work out where those will be posted and how they'll be posted.
Sure.
So let's see what else. So chapter 3, I'll have the chapter 3, Bernard, PowerPoints posted for you, even though we're not going over them tonight. I think that chapter was pretty self-explanatory, and I think it was pretty oversimplified. I'll post the EA value models, and know that there are many more value models, but I picked a couple that fit together that I kind of liked. I thought gave us value in the things that they pulled together into categories. So, Susan.
Yes.
Hi, how are you?
Doing fine.
Oh, that's great. So everyone, welcome Sue Kopeck. She's here as a guest speaker for us, and you are the first one, Sue, so no pressure. Sue is from Ford, and Ford has been through EA multiple times, right, Sue?
Yes.
Right, and so I'm hoping that, I'm not quite sure what your slides cover, but I'm hoping that you will share some of the process of standing up EA multiple times and what that entailed, and how you got to a good place with EA at Ford. Sue is a business architect for Ford, correct, Sue?
Yes.
Right. And Sue was in my class EA 871 last fall, and didn't we have a good time?
We did. It was a
We
very
did.
good class.
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. So Sue, I'm going to give you presenter rights now.
Sure.
So you can drive this.
Okay.
I think I'm giving you presenter rights. No, I'm not. I
There we go.
did.
Right there.
Okay, great. Awesome. There you go, Sue. Take it away.
So I have just a few slides because I wanted to, instead of just reading through slide material, I welcome the chance to answer any of your questions that you have on our EA journey. So I'm going to give a little bit of background about what Ford's been through in the last probably 15 years. And I've been a part of it. I started in Ford about almost 34 years ago. And 15 years ago or so, I was in the information architecture space and then moved over to enterprise architecture. It looks like it says I can't hear you. Are you okay? Yeah. Yes? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Susan.
Okay. Very good. All right. So yeah, as I said, I really started at Ford about 34 years ago, and information architecture was my specialty, and I decided to expand a little into the enterprise architecture area. And at that
Susan,
time,
sorry to interrupt. I guess Rosalie is not able to hear you.
Because she's not presenter. Let me see what's going on.
Rosalie, are you able to speak up? Okay, she's gonna drop off and log in again.
Okay. Okay, so I'll give a little bit about myself while she's doing that. So Ford Motor Company started doing enterprise architecture, similar to, I'm sure, what a lot of you think EA is all about, was more of an IT architecture background, right? Where you work on standards and worrying about whether IT has any standardization at all. And then you think that that's enterprise architecture. So we started much the way that many of you, where we put in place some activities in the development arena where we would standardize what they had to comply with as far as standard technologies and things like that. And then they were calling that, architecture. And it was more from an infrastructure and application perspective. And we basically have a layer cake of 4 layers. The infrastructure area, the application area, then an area called information architecture, and then at the top, business architecture, which is our newest area. Okay, and now we are fully engaged with enterprise architecture. We have a whole organization that operates underneath the Office of the CIO. And the Office of the CIO works directly for the CIO, not in the business, but we work hand in hand. Business architects work hand in hand with the business. We also have other organizations that are more development centered. One is application development. Another one is all around the Office of ITO, which is the Office of Technical Operations. And so they deal more with the operations, the maintenance, and the hardware of systems. And then we have a group that actually interfaces with the business called Business IT. They're more of portfolio managers that operate and understand the business. So let's see if I can change screens here. I don't have presenter anymore. So Rosalie, you'll have to change screens for me to the next one. It looks like you have presentation ability. Let me try to grab it if it works that way. Nope, she is.
Yes, she can't hear us.
I'm going to type her, into her. Yep. Oh, yeah, see, Jonathan, you already did. I'm not talking right now, Michael, so you didn't lose any sound. I'm just trying to type at the same time. Change to next slide, and we'll see if she can do that for us.
Yeah, now you should have access.
Okay, very good. Okay, so enterprise architecture was driving along very merrily, doing IT architecture really. And as we did that, we started finding out problems because we had some reviews that were required of development teams early on to see if they complied with technology, and then later on as they actually implemented something or were ready to implement. And we found out, especially in information architecture, it's kind of late in the game when you want to stop things if you haven't developed them right? So we started saying, well, you know, it's kind of late in the game to do enterprise architecture work and getting it right. We need to move this up. And we listened to some industry experts, and they said that enterprise architecture really comes before you even have $1 in your hand to work on any projects, that you really should be working with the business to convert their ideas and into something that could be a solution, could be a process change, or could be information that just gets more aligned. So our enterprise architecture group actually moved up the chain to even before dollars are spent or projects are put together and defined. The business architecture group works with them. I am not able now. Loud and clear. Okay. Oh, okay. Okay, so I just want to make sure we're getting there. So enterprise architecture then said, okay, now we're doing pretty good. The enterprise architects started working with the business in certain areas, and because there weren't many business architects, we decided that we would spend our time helping on major programs, things that crossed the entire enterprise, things that would fall between the cracks normally if you just looked at a project from a chimney perspective. And so we looked at things that had major investments and things that crossed the different product lines. And we asked the business how we could help them. And there were problems with their business processes there were problems with their information, and there obviously were problems with their tools. This was at a time when Mullally had come in, and he said, you know, instead of just cost savings, you need to really consolidate the way you're doing your processes across the world. And why do we need more than one way to do something? When you do a plane, you know, in a plane, you only have one dashboard that most pilots know how to operate. Why shouldn't it be the same way for automotive? And so we started consolidating the way not only we develop products, but the way we do processes. And so across the world, we were trying to commonize between the way we do things in North America and Europe and Asia Pacific across the world. And PD was one of the first areas that started doing those things. Now, so we're looking at commonizing things, and the business started seeing some benefit. I mean, they actually said, wait a minute here, we're actually seeing that we don't have to do anything with IT. IT is just the follow-on of maybe automating the stuff that we come up with, but sometimes it's just getting an alignment of our processes across the world, and that'll save us money. And we started to put together a picture from a business architecture point of view of the models we would standardize. So you talk about frameworks and picking a framework. We worked on Zachman and then TOGAF, and we picked out a standard set of models and determined what those models should be that would really help us. And we say that we don't just develop models and pictures from an IT perspective. We really pick out models that would help support communicating the message between business and IT. But one of the models that we actually do, and you guys were talking about it, is benefits and goals and objectives. We call it the motivation model. So we always start our work with a motivation model. It says, why are you doing this? And we don't do it just because we say, why is IT, or what's IT going to deliver? It's not about, yeah, we're going to deliver this IT product, or we're going to finish a solution or put in a change to an IT system. It's all about, what are you going to change in the business? What bottom line are you going to impact? Are you going to correct quality? Are you going to make an influence on the customer's behavior? Are you going to save some efficiency? So what are you doing as far as goals from a business perspective? So that's how we drive all of our enterprise architecture engagements that we do. Then along about 2 years ago, we started looking at all our enterprise architecture work that we were doing with this small group of business architects. And we said, you know what, we still need to make another change. We actually analyzed our enterprise architecture work and all the 4 different layers that we had, and we compared ourselves to the industry, and we actually found out that we need to drive the change. Instead of just doing some building planning of particular engagements, we need to look more holistically from a city planner view. And so we started taking the tack that we really need to look again at an even higher level than we were looking at before. So this happens to be our portfolio management process. We have 3 different areas of our process. One is envisioning. So I talked about getting the business basically envision what their goals and their objectives are and what's their vision for the future. And then we talk about strategy formulation, and the process is small just on purpose, but this is an eye chart when we print it out as well on a big huge plotter. But it basically shows 4 different rows for each one of our layers doing work in parallel to develop a strategy for the business. And that means from an infrastructure layer, from an application layer, from an information layer, and from a process or business area as well. So all 4 types of architects are working together hand in hand on a strategy. And then they develop a roadmap, and they do that in portfolio planning, where they develop a roadmap of projects that will transition us from the current state to the future that's desired by the customer. And at this point, right before portfolio planning, they put in a business case and try to get the funding. So right about here is where it becomes, yep, you've made your business case well enough with all the analysis you did prior in order to do things. So we're basically taking high-level ideas from the customer, changing them into strategies for the future and approving projects that will make those strategies happen. And this is a little deeper dive into that. We really have 2 halves of the world: solution definition and solution delivery. And solution definition is where we mostly play in my area of business architecture, where the customer is working with this business IT group to come up with ideas, and then they work hand in hand to get an application development person on. And then they say, yeah, I think that's a big enough thing where we need to architect it the right way. And so we get all those different architects in line to actually do things. If they need some long lead stuff on infrastructure, then they may also include the infrastructure people as well. And then when they've got it to a certain point where they think they can get measurable benefits out of it and know how big the bread box is and actually put dollars and cents to how much that project might impact or improve things, then this line comes into play and put together projects and get approval for them. And then that quickly moves through delivery where they can actually design and build whatever's necessary. And again, they already have at this point then goals and objectives that they need to meet with that solution. So they know what their end point is going to be based on the roadmap that you put together. So that's kind of the life cycle of a major program or opportunity. So we're doing these opportunities, changing them into fabulous projects. And then we did another analysis, as I said, of ourselves to say, how mature are we in the EA space? And that was 2 years ago. And we took into consideration these architecture elements to measure ourselves. What's our process look like? How are we developing things? How well are we linking up with the business? Is senior management involved? Do we have the different product lines or skill teams participating in our engagements? Are we communicating well? Are we including security, and is security being done well? Have we had any problems? Are we governing well? And how is our investment and acquisition strategy as far as IT? Are we including them, and how are they included? And what we found out was that we really needed to work on our linkages with the business. And like I said, we need to do more of the work we are doing, maybe even supporting an enterprise blueprint where we put together a big picture for the business so they can see where they spend their IT dollars. And also kind of the metrics that you guys are just talking about. It says, you know, how well are we aligned from a process point of view across the company, or at least each value stream or each product line? How are we doing? How is our information alignment doing? How is our application commonality doing? And how is our technical health? And then giving that to the business as a picture or a dashboard that says, here's how you're doing, and here's how your IT dollars supporting those capabilities that you want to have happen. And so those metrics are being put in place, and that dashboard's being put in place along with blueprints to show them the bigger picture. Now we're continually working in a space to benefit and provide business outcomes for the business through our normal engagements, but we're also doing this work of high-level blueprints for the enterprise. So that's the direction that we're heading, is actually taking on doing an overall blueprint for the company, as well as these major outcomes that will help the business to move and to become more agile and to have better outcomes in their business when there's a disruption, right? So I've talked a lot, and I'm sure you have lots of questions about what we're doing, so ask away.
Hello. First of all, thank you for coming out here and talking to us. My question is, this process you've laid out of the couple slides ago, is that just for IT projects, or is that for, like, you know, if a new car is being developed or anything like that?
It is very similar to our product development life cycle, because they do innovation and ideas, and then they go through a process as well where they take those through to a business case and then move as well in a very similar fashion. So we fashion these things, obviously, that's what we know. It isn't exactly the car company. They call that a different service. This is portfolio management. That's more around either plant floor systems or around the world of product development. So I won't say that they're exactly the same, but we always pattern ourselves against our own business. So very similar, where you start off with ideas and bubble them down to a certain set that actually have some merit and will actually achieve some benefits, and then get approval for that and go ahead with those changes then.
Okay, thank you.
Susan, this is Vishal. My question would be like, okay, something that you mentioned earlier was related to the motivation model that you use for determining some value.
Yes.
Can you talk about that a little bit more? And I think, is it based on a TOGAF model for motivation, or can you help us understand that?
Yes. If you were to look at either Zachman or TOGAF, you'd see in there that you have to have motivation as one of your columns for Zachman, and TOGAF, definitely the same thing. So a motivation model includes goals and objectives, and we have certain pattern that we teach people how to actually ask questions about to get to the right goals. You constantly ask, why are you doing this? So if a customer said, oh, because I'm having a problem in this area, that's why I want to do it. Or I want to get a brand new system because mine's old and I just want to fix it, right? You say, well, why is that important? Well, because it's taking me too long to manually do things, or it's not integrated with stuff. Well, why is that important? Because I don't get a consistent answer on my reports. So why is that important? Because I need to have visibility, for instance, to where my vehicles are when I'm delivering them. Oh, so you don't have visibility to where your vehicles are when you're delivering them? No. So we need, what gives you the most pain in that area? Well, not having visibility during delivery across the ocean. Oh, so we need to improve visibility of your vehicles while it's transported over the ocean. Oh, okay. And then so you get to the bottom line, and then you start asking about, as far as objectives, like Dr. Acker said, measurable things that you can do in a shorter time frame. The goals are very lofty and generic, but where you want to be in let's say 10 years for us, right? We have one project that's actually was 20 years, but about 10 years, right? The objectives then are more about 12 to 18 months bound that way around what you want, but not necessarily, again, from an IT project sense. It's not delivery objectives. There really are two goals and two sets of objectives. One in that area of solution definition, of defining what the value will bring and what this is that you're changing. And the other one's more in the solution delivery area that says what's your goals and objectives for the IT project itself that will come to fruition, right? You want to integrate with this other system. You want to improve your connectivity or interoperability or standards or whatever. That would be on the solution delivery side. On the solution definition side, it's all around business benefits that you will receive during this time, and you try to incrementally put what would you provide in 12 to 18 months. What kind of changes would you like to see? And then we apply metrics. We try to get them to actually put metrics against each of the objectives. And as somebody was talking before, how do you actually determine, what's a benefit, and how do you put some dollars and cents to that? And I find even in information architecture, we used to have trouble monetizing things. But what we found is if you can quantify, for instance, the end difference that you will have, for instance, will you lose any customers by what you're doing? Will you increase your customers? Will you increase your volume of your product output? Will you improve your cost efficiency? So what are you going to do, or how many changes will you make, and how do you monetize that? So if you can monetize it in some way, the value that you're going to achieve, obviously then there'll be a bigger business value, and the customer will go along with it, right? There are soft savings along the way, right?
So you really are. Why am I going? You really are monetizing.
Yes.
Everything. How are those numbers real?
Yeah. So we're not monetizing everything, but we, as much as we can, let's say. So obviously there's going to be soft savings, but finance loves to see hard savings anywhere they can.
Well, sure they do. Yeah. I mean.
But sometimes what you, in effect, have to do to actually prove you've made those savings at the end of the project, they just take the funds away. So if you say, I'm going to save 3 heads, Ford actually takes the 3 heads away from your budget, right? And it's just gone. So you have to make it work. So you don't put down just fake numbers or make it up. You actually have to go in there and actually think about what you might actually do to save money. I'll give you a perfect example. So my present project that I'm on is on the delivery of the vehicles. And in North America, there's a third-party logistics company that actually handles much of the visibility of the vehicles. And one of the objectives that they're putting down for the project that I'm on, after we did all this analysis and definition of what they're going to do, right, is to get rid of the company that's doing that third-party logistics. Now that's an easy number to come up with because they know how much they're spending right now. And so they actually look at what can I get rid of by either being more aligned in our processes, having better information, having all of the regions doing a consistent process, or in some cases, one of the parts of the delivery project that I'm on is around getting a better ETA to the customer. And we actually have anecdotal stories about customers walking out in Asia Pacific because they weren't told when their vehicle was going to arrive, right? That's a loss of a customer, and you can calculate how much that customer's worth over time and loyalty and everything else. So by having those numbers, or even data quality, there's a certain percentage of data that's typically erroneous. If you can cut that amount out and say 10% no longer will be a problem with data quality, then those are hard savings. So we try to definitely do as much monetization of the benefits as possible, and then also get in there, there's soft savings that are going to occur. Now, is that directly accountable to EA? Probably not, right? Because it's a lot of, hey, there's a business change, there's people that are going to change, there's projects in IT that are going to help with all of that. But the value comes back that EA was the one that made it visible, that made that change actually start to happen. So we instigated it, right? So those are the benefits that we start to tout. Hey, nobody would have done a better analysis on delivery if you didn't have an EA person on it, right? Nobody would have even known about the problems. They would have just gone off on their merry way and continued the way they were. So we tout our let's say, sparking the interest in an area, and that we were the ones that instigated a change, versus EA actually got those changes to happen. Those happen because of the projects that get implemented over time. So you can't really take credit for all those things that happen because a lot of it's IT and business and information actually changing, right? So we can't take credit for all that, but we can take credit and say, we were the ones that made that very visible and made the business customer aware of it, made IT aware that there was a problem that they should be working on. So I think that because of word of mouth of our good works, and because we've been able to communicate very well with the business, I have to laugh because even on the project that I'm on, when I was first introduced to the business customer, I was told behind the scenes by the IT folks that she was very difficult to work with, that she didn't like IT, she threw them out of her office all the time, and that she didn't like IT at all, right? So I was kind of hesitant to go visit and eat with her, but I went, and she thought I was the greatest thing since sliced bread. Oh, welcomed me in her office and really considers me not IT. Right. Because of the way I talk business with her. I don't talk solutions and tech talk with her, right? So if I'm talking business and understanding her business and where the problems are in her process, or the information that she gets, or in the IT solutions that aren't talking to each other, if I talk business, what does it mean to you, and what does it mean to the process? and what does current state look like on your process. It's different than talking, yeah, I'm going to give you a solution in 6 months, and this is what it's going to do, and this is how it's going to operate, and here's the screens, and here's the database, and here's the network it's going to be on, right? In my area, the customers just don't like, why? I don't know. I don't need to know that stuff.
Right. You guys, do I still sound weird?
Yes, you still sound weird.
I do?
Oh.
Damn. All right. Sorry. Yes, thanks. Okay. Keep going, everyone. I'll be back. Oh, geez. Okay. Keep going. Ask Susan questions.
I have a question.
Yes.
Regarding the triage process.
Yes.
So it's safe to say that not all ideas actually go to the architecture services group.
Yep.
Okay. And is in your company, is any of the architects part of the triage process? Because what you have here, I'm sorry.
This specific triage process was because this whole solution definition piece was new. Right? This was our normal way of operating, where architects got involved along this way and did a checkpoint here and then further on, right? But we didn't have this piece, so it was brand new. And things got stuck here because they didn't know whether they should get an architect involved or whether they shouldn't get an architect, and which architect do they get involved, right? So that was really the triage that's there. And we put together some rules and some trainings to get across the point. We still do a little bit of triage when the requests come through. But triage is meant to say, do you need a full-blown set of architects working on this? Or can you handle it as an enhancement or continue on your merry way, and all you need to do is order some hardware, right? And most of the time what we found is that people weren't considering all the impacts that a change could have. For instance, somebody would say, oh, I'm just going to change out this hardware and I'm going to put in a new database, or I'm just going to put in a new replacement system. That's all I'm going to do. Or I'm going to train from green screens to J2EE. But nobody ever thought, well, there may be some integration problems or data quality problems that you might have to solve. Or maybe when you're consolidating two applications, one set of processes don't need to be there, and you can consolidate your processes as well. So more times than not, we would influence them to include an architect, at least to see what needed to be changed. But from a business architecture view, just be clear that we don't have many business architects. So we start saying we can't do everything, and we would only get involved when there was some very high level, like I said, IT spend potential investment, or things that crossed the different barriers of the different skill teams, or something that was just a holistic thing that they needed to fix in the enterprise. So something very big. That's when business architects got involved.
This is what we call the demand process at my company. But as an enterprise architect, I am doing the triage, and I'm the one who's deciding whether or not to involve the other solution architects, information architects, and so on. So I'm just, I guess the green box for us would just include the architecture services is providing that triage process. So I'm just looking at yours to see that it's kind of it's another group.
And it's interesting that well, the triage was actually a couple representatives from each, one representative from each type of architect. So and an AD person and a BIT person, or business IT person. So that they would all give advice to that project on what to do next. But we are, as we're doing this EA 2.0, which is doing more of a blueprint of the company and things, we are refining our, quote, RACI on who's going to take the lead on architecture things. And it's looking like the business architects are going to be contacted first, and then they will decide on what other architects need to be involved as time goes on. So that's the way it's looking right now in our RACI chart of who's going to have the lead on this type of stuff. So, and it is because we kind of lead them now. We already tell them, hey, looks like we need an information architect. You guys are not aligned on your data. Looks like we need a solution architect because there's some problem with technology health in here. Looks like we need an infrastructure guy to order some hardware. So we kind of already lead it. And so it's moving in that direction where we're doing less of the triage because they're getting used to us now, right? And more of it where the business architect is doing this lead off of the different architecture groups. Cool. I'm glad we're not doing things so totally different.
Dolphin and Terrorism questions on the chat window.
Yes, let's see. BA's talk, biz talk, yes. And it's interesting enough, on this side of the world, there's BAs called business analysts. And on this side, there's business architects. And somewhere around here, we do a handoff because the business analysts then take it down to, let's say, use cases and or user stories and things like that. And they get into the very low-level details of the process flow. So we take our high-level process flows that we use just to get to the point of a good business case and understanding the problem. And then somewhere around here, we hand off to a business analyst. The content slide, just so you know, I wasn't able to get approval to hand them over to you. So you're lucky that you're going to get to see them at least. Is the process agile? Actually, we are currently working on an agile delivery project. We did all this upfront stuff. We're right about in here. And so we're doing agile stuff on architecture work. It's very interesting. I say you still have to do this piece in more of a non-agile world. I mean, agile, there's a big A and there's a little a, right? Agile meaning, are you following all these agile processes and stand-ups and things like that? Or being agile and be able to be flexible and change things? And I think as I'm studying EA 872, by putting in some good foundations, we're letting the business dream a little bit and how they could change the business, which is letting them be innovative and letting them explore new areas. So as you get all of your data aligned and all your applications aligned and things like that, and the process that are hardcore aligned, then you can say, hey, what about trying this? Because you've got a baseline of stuff that's working together, you can allow them to be a little bit more agile and flexible and innovative and take experiments and do things, right? Because the business is operating efficiently and doing well. Software, okay, so in feedback and solution delivery identifies an issue, is solution definition revisited or once opportunity? Well, we think we do a pretty good job up here, and we haven't seen it really having to be revisited, but we still do maintain a review here to make sure that they do follow through and make sure that what we said the definition should be and the technology that to be used should follow through, so that they do align their information, they do align their processes and things. So there's still these reviews that happen, but they're more like guardians of what we set up here. And is it linear? Well, as we develop a roadmap in here, there are many parallel paths to making that roadmap transition happen. So we don't just have a current state and then a future state 20 years from now. We have varying transition states because we have a lot of legacy systems. We can't just tear out everything and the business would fail, right? So we have to incrementally change things. So you'll see pictures of how things change over time, whether it be getting rid of processes or combining tools or replacing tools, or even information standards, how they progress over time, and how we take a standard and implement in one master and then try to influence the rest of the systems that are using old antiquated way of that information being used. So everything's a transition, and transitions can be in parallel because you could have multiple paths of things being changed at once. How large is the EA team? Well, we actually started our little business architecture team probably back 15 years ago with 5 or 6 people. Then it grew to about 10 or 12. When they reorganized us in April, we had maybe 20 business architects, which they now spread over the different value streams. So we have 2 or 3 business architects along with other types of architects in each of the product line. And those architects work hand in hand with solution and information and infrastructure. And then we keep a business architecture COP going to keep us all aligned on how we do our work. So we're now taking advantage of the other type of architects and teaching them all about what business architecture is, starting to use them and convert them because they talk too much tech talk. So we're teaching them business speak. And that team of architects is about probably 3 times as large as we were a business architect. So I would say there's probably about 100 architects in the whole space right now underneath the EA umbrella. The Agile software process most times builds a rigid architecture, too piecemeal. Yeah, but you can incrementally build an Agile architecture. Yes, you can. The way I define I give you an example of a metaphor of how I think of knowing at least the high level that you have to have before you can cross the line. Where's the line at? So if you were going to take a trip across the country, at least the United States, right? Normally people that are going to take a nice road trip at least have to know what states they're going to go through. And we used to have tour books that we'd go to the AAA office and get, and each one would be a book on each state, right? So you'd want to get at least the state map and the tour book before you start to know which states you're going to touch, right? You have to know which ones you're going to have to go through and which order you're going to go through them, right? At least to know that you're going to touch all these different spaces. That's the high level stuff that we work on. When you want to get to the low level and actually implement and execute the road trip, you have to know which roads you're going to be on and what the speed limit's going to be and all the governances around those type of things. So that's the level of the detail you need once you cross the delivery line. So in the Agile world at the top, I still say before you can start the road trip, you at least have to have a basis of knowing where you're headed, at least from a very high level, and what states you're going to touch. And then you can be agile and change. There's like an ice storm, like we just went from Florida to Michigan a couple weeks ago, and we had, we take this time, when should we leave? And so we make it through the ice storm in Kentucky and Tennessee, right? So you can vary your times and when you leave and which roads you take based on the weather conditions and whether you're sightseeing and what you want to see on the road, right? So you can vary that, and your agile world can take those risks into consideration and then move and change. But if you said, hey, I didn't know I had to hit Kentucky and Tennessee, you wouldn't even have those ideas in your mind when you knew where you were starting. Okay. Yep, tying social media, historic sites, best residents, and other trips. Yes, exactly. For an automotive company, provides a good competitive edge. Yes, and you might see that in the future because there's things in the future about putting GPS in the cars. So I'm sure they're going to take advantage of the knowing when you're passing by a certain area and letting you know, hey, there's a gas station on the corner that's selling you gas at this price, or a restaurant that has a really good deal. So you never know what you might see in the future.
Can you go back to the architecture layers?
Yes, let's see. I'm not the Rosalie, are you on? Can you just switch back? Let's see. I think it's, there we go. Thank you. This one? Is this the page?
No, the one that showed the layers of the architecture, starting with strategy at the top.
This one.
That one.
Yeah.
What kind of schedule or time frame do you allow to go to, well, when you start at the top?
Yeah.
To analyze what's going to be involved in each of these?
So when we do any of our models, whether it be capability models or process models, we used to say we would have a standard that said, hey, you do this in 2 weeks. And we had a little model that showed every 2 weeks doing a review and those types of things when we started out. Now I think we're much more fluid because we know and realize that not all models fit the situation that you're in. And so you have to be really fluid to know that a certain model will help to again communicate what the customer wants to show as the business value he's going to get. But one of the things that I think you can assume that each one of these layers is going to be more complex depending on the number of stakeholders you have to deal with and the number of organizations you're going to have to get information from. So the sooner you can tell how many organizations and which are the right stakeholders, it'll make it easier. And again, it depends on their schedules and their availability because we work hand in hand directly with the business. Again, we're not going through an IT layer and getting information from them who gets it from the business. We are actually sitting down with the business person who at a high level will understand what their problems are. So not maybe the guy who's actually operating the computer, but the guy who has to report to his boss why he didn't make his objectives there. So
yeah, that's the fun part.
Yeah, that's the fun part. So I would say on each one of these, the strategy layer is more around, yes, the vision, the goals and objectives. And that is probably my biggest struggle because business doesn't know what a business goal looks like. So we have to teach them and they're learning more and more. Now they're getting better at it. But that's one of the biggest things is knowing and making sure you have all the right players because if you for instance, I give you a perfect example, the project I'm on, right? It falls between marketing and sales and manufacturing. Delivery of a vehicle sounds like it should be in the MP&L logistics area, or we've built the vehicle, now we got to get it there, so it's probably somewhere in manufacturing, right? But lo and behold, marketing and sales has a say in it because they have to give an ETA or a promise date to the customer when they're going to get their delivery of their vehicle. So both organizations have competing goals. Sales wants to be accurate on when that ETA is, and MP&L or manufacturing wants to be very efficient in when they get the vehicle there and how they get it there. So let's say there's a big rail strike and something happens and you can't get your vehicle there because something's delaying it. Do you do extra over and above just to get that car there to that customer, to meet that customer's dates and deadlines, to save their loyalty? Or do you say, well, it's going to cost me more, so I don't want to take that route and change the delivery mechanism that I'm using? So they have competing goals. So getting alignment on goals and the vision is probably the hardest thing to do. But once you have that, then it identifies the scope that you're working on and everybody knows where they're headed, at least from a vision and where their objectives are going to take them. Capability models are the next thing we sort of lean toward. Organization is, again, going into that scope will help you to determine who's got to be the players and the stakeholders involved. Capability models is something we had to train everybody about what is a capability versus a process. Capabilities are things that the business does. And I use the example of weight management versus taking a Zumba class or Weight Watchers class. Weight management is something you will always want to do if you have a goal of being a healthy person. But how you do it and what processes you take may change over time. So these capabilities are something, at least from an automotive company, that we figured out what are the capabilities for an automotive company you should have, and then we use that to compare against processes, information, and technology against that, and we bounce that all over the place. So knowing what capabilities are impacted is important for us. And then we get into processes to show how processes are poorly. One project that I was on from an IT for IT perspective, we actually found out that there was a process that you went through for approving hardware that wasn't even being used. When you went through all of these paperwork and all this stuff, it didn't even matter because there was another process that just said, hey, this is what we use to approve hardware. So there was a duplicate, a redundant process in the whole scheme of things that they could just eliminate. So you can't just look from an information point of view, because the information would have been, yeah, I'm doing the information right, but the process was completely redundant. So processes are important across our world because there's global and there's product line and there's all kinds of things that can show a process to be out of order. And then information standards, obviously coming up with the standard way of looking at data, application, technology, and things like that are all in the bottom layers. And some of our systems are frankly old. So looking at those layers are important to say, hey, I'm not going to put that on the future state. I'm not going to put that system that's 20 years old green screen on the future state when I know it's got to go away, right? So we look at the learning platform and say, what are the things that are not going to be on there in the foundation there?
Great, thank you.
Sure. Has the EA team been asked to prove its value? We wouldn't have been able to reorganize and get all the new management if they didn't see value in us. So I think we proved our value. A lot of it was word of mouth and good advertising, and them just seeing that we were making a difference instead of IT just putting in systems that may or may not met their goals in the end. You know, putting in a system may not have influenced better reports or fine-tuned processes or anything else. And by business architects and others coming in early and saying, I think you may not even need an IT solution, you just need to do better on how you operate, actually change their thoughts about what IT does. So we really didn't have to do anything except sell our good work.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Now, it's taken us 15 years. So it's not been a simple road, though. It has been over time. And we started early on thinking, oh, we'll just have an enterprise data model, an enterprise process model, and everybody will just align to it. And we'll get business owners to own each of these areas, and that'll be it, right? It'll all be magic. It'll just happen. Yeah. Nope.
Susan, I heard you say you had to get rid of a logistics company.
Well, they're thinking about that as part of the savings of the project that I'm on. Yes, that is one of the metrics they're thinking of you saying. Yeah.
I work for a logistics company. If you're looking for a good one, it's Genco.
All right. You can drop me any information that you have, because that is my work right now. I'm totally involved with knowing logistics. Now, I've been around the company a little bit, so I've kind of been in most of the product lines that we have. I started in plant floor, and then I went to finance and purchasing and PD, marketing and sales, and then now finally back to manufacturing with logistics. So I've and even IT for IT. So I've hit most of the product line, right? And I know, unfortunately, a little too much about the company and how it operates, and it scares me that we get cars out, but now I'm really, really in depth with knowing how a vehicle gets transported. It's scary. What have been the top 3 competitive advantages that the EA program has contributed to Ford? Oh, just in time, because I have a value presentation. Looks like one of the EA objectives, I can just name you, okay? It says increase business agility by building and reusing shared business and technology components. Okay, so just like you said, we're making the business a little bit more agile by giving them technology that's kind of standardized and shared. Better return on existing investment, reduce risk for future investment. So by us doing blueprints, we're going to show them where their investments are, and that they know that they should be putting money into this area versus other areas that are weak in their capabilities. Alignment of the business strategies and technology capabilities through a strategy and integrated technology plan. So again, if you know where you're headed with your business and your technology with that future state diagram, you'll be able to align your business to that over time and have those transition states. Mitigation of technology risks through rapid prototyping and proof of concepts. Again, because if you have standard technology, that's the infrastructure guys going, hey, if you put that in there, then you can obviously prototype easier on knowing you have a good basis for which to test new things. Maximize return on technology investments by establishing and governing pragmatic standards and solution patterns. This kind of gets into what EA 872 talks about, and I don't want to steal anybody's thunder, but basically if you have a good solid foundation, then you make your top layer easier for them to be agile and change into things. So part of having standards is, let's say, having SOA services and being more modular in how you design things. So it isn't just coming in with common solutions like an ERP that would wipe out everything, but being more modular so you can substitute new technology as it comes and goes. And then faster, simpler, and cheaper procurement. Well, obviously, if we have everything stable, then we can do better in procuring new things as they come up. So that's what they put as the objectives for EA and how they would improve the business and give them more of a competitive advantage. Sure. And I really think that you're going to read some articles on business outcomes. And I think we really contribute to that. When there's a disruption or a potential disruption, we really do help with getting them back on track or being able to give that competitive advantage.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
So it's 8:56. Anybody have a final question for Sue? Sue, this has been great. I'm sorry I missed some of it, but I'll go back and listen to the recording so I can hear everything.
Josie put in there, capitalize on disruptions. Yeah, from a business architecture point of view, I do. Anywhere there's a problem, I'm here to solve it, and not just with an IT solution.
Sue, you're a handy person to have around then, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I can see that.
Thank you.
I hope you all enjoyed it. It was fun.
Thanks a lot, Sue. It's been great. Glad to have you back.
Yep, it's the next class is even more fun. You guys are going to enjoy.
872, you're having a good time?
Oh yeah, it's good. It's interesting. It really fits in with exactly where I see our journey has been.
Awesome.
So, interesting class. All right, thank you all.
All right, Sue, thank you. Okay, everyone, that's our guest speaker. I hope I'm sounding okay now. I think maybe I need to get a new computer. Just the excuse I need. You guys are just the excuse I need for some new technology. Great. So I think we had an awesome class tonight. I hope you got a lot out of Sue. Next week we have Scott Bittler from Gartner, who will be our guest speaker. And our topic next week is, I'm looking, it is outcome versus traditional. Traditional versus outcome-driven EA, some of that I think even Sue mentioned. And so Scott Bittler, you'll enjoy him. Yes, you'll love Scott. You'll enjoy Scott, and he's almost as knowledgeable as Sue, right? So everyone, if there's no further questions or comments, I think we can call this a wrap. So thanks a lot for your participation.
Thank you, Rosalie. Have a good night.